Hello and welcome back to the Awakening Philosophy podcast channel. My name is Jed and today we are reading the Meno. Hooray for us. The children cheer for Meno. Thanks for joining me, those in the chat. Well, the one person in the chat, thanks for being here. Let's begin our reading with the first thing said in the text, just to anchor us back with where this has all started and what is the fundamental question this text is supposedly addressing. Now, you might be clever and say that, well, even though there is a question being posed at the beginning of the text specifically, there might be other more important questions or twists within the text itself for us to discover. And if you are one of those people, then please share your thoughts in the comment section or on Discord. And I think you're right. I just want to know what they are. So here is the explicit question of the text that we're on. Meno meets Socrates and says, can you tell me, O Socrates, whether virtue is teachable? That's the first question. Is virtue teachable? Or is virtue not teachable but acquired by practice? So he offers an alternative. Or if neither by practice nor by learning, then does it come to human beings by nature or in some other way? So this is the nature versus nurture argument, and in other words, are people just born better? Is Socrates because of the way he was born and it's just chance? Or is it nurture? If it's nurture, is it something that we can be taught, or is it something that's more of a habit? That's the question. And Socrates' response is, well, before we talk about whether or not it's teachable, don't you want to first understand what virtue is? That's how it all began. And here we are, about halfway through. And Meno apparently is in a stung state, aporia, stung like being stung by a jellyfish. All that, in that you are puzzled and you can't speak, and you thought you could talk about something but you can't, and you're maybe confused, hopefully puzzled, hopefully curious. Being stung or aporia state of mind. Perhaps Meno has been brought to this when he began with those questions that presumed he knew what virtue was. Or maybe he's not. Maybe he's fighting back. Maybe his ego is in control and he doesn't like being proven wrong. Or doesn't like being not seen as an expert on something. And then Socrates responds by showing, oh, actually it's good to be proven wrong because then you're not mistaken. And he gave an example, the Pythag theorem, the mathematical theorem that the slave boy thought he understood but didn't. But then Socrates asking him questions so that he would realize that he was mistaken was a good thing. Is what Socrates is demonstrating to us and Meno. And so it seems to be encouraging Meno to get into this stung state of mind. I'm not sure whether Socrates is really buying it. When Meno says, oh, I'm so stung. Meno has, that's the gesture he would make. He's already demonstrated and said that he doesn't know how to define things, and he doesn't know the dialectic, a way of understanding and defining things. And Socrates has already pointed out he hasn't gone from beyond understanding to nous yet. Nous, the direct apprehension of mind itself, prior to and beyond its physical expression. So your mind turned around and experiencing itself as pure being. He hasn't had that experience, which is where the dialectic is leading us. If we play the game and we don't have counterattacks like we are seeing from Meno, where he might be trying to defend his ego. Whatever short-term pleasure you get from being in charge on this planet for a while, or whatever short-term kind of pleasure you get from being seen as a certain way, or having a certain position or fame or image or ego, I don't think it's worth sabotaging kind of pleasure that lasts beyond this world, because it's by definition immortal. Also your purpose, also developing understanding, also developing an art, also learning how to understand things, learning how to define things, learning to how to, what Socrates demonstrating, communicate that in a friendly way. And we're wondering about that way as well. Beneficial, definitely. Sacrificing all of those things is what people who are like Meno, perhaps, are doing. They're sacrificing all of those good things, all of those self-logos things to maintain, as we're saying and talking about in the chat before stream, the ego or your money or your wealth. Same thing, right? So there's some stakes there for the soul of Meno and us, the reader. We are in Meno's position. Hopefully, too, you're reading at both levels, and you're realizing, well, okay, there's a message for people at Meno's level, and there's a message for people at Socrates' level as well. And there are some clues about a level beyond Socrates' level, so we might as well read in all three ways if we can. That's some fun. You don't have to do that. You can start from the beginning, but it's fun to keep them all in mind. Thumbs up. Yeah, so those are the stakes on our soul and Meno's soul. The consequences of not allowing ourselves to be in aporia or being stung. So that's where we are, and Meno's response to that is, well, okay, let's say I've been proven wrong. Why go on a search? If I don't know what it is, how will I recognize it? How will I know what it is I'm after? How will I know where to find it? How will I know that I've got it? So there's no point in searching for what you don't know. And if you do know, then there's no point searching because you already know it. So why search for anything? This is where we left the text. Because Socrates points out, well, by the way, our learning, you do know. You've just forgotten. So it wasn't a bad question, per se. But the answer is important. Learning is essentially a remembering. Therefore, where we first got the information of the certain things that we can learn, the learnable things, we talked about nous a moment ago, the knowable, the nousable things, the ousia-able things. We must have been in an experience with them prior to our physical incarnation. Therefore, there is an immortality to our soul, and the nature of what is knowable is itself eternal or immortal. So what? Also, it makes sense of the earlier statement Socrates made about Meno's education being garbage, in part because there was not a facilitation of that immortal part of the soul knowing directly the immortal or eternal nature of mind and being in reality. The experience of what we will call knowledge. But nous is probably better, even though it's funny because it's Greek. Which is interesting. It makes sense of that. And from that, so this is the idea of there being multiple levels when we read. Just that itself is fantastic. Like, it's a fantastic topic to be focused on. Are we eternal or immortal? What is learning? What is knowable? Of all of the things, you could be talking about Tom Cruise's latest movie project. You could be talking about a crypto meme. But talking about whether or not we have an immortal nature of the soul. How do we know it? What is the nature of knowing? Is that itself eternal? Which would lead to other questions, of course. Shed light on what we are to do while we're on the physical plane. So as a topic, that's pretty rad that they're looking at it. And that conclusion, yes, we are immortal. And the implications that follow about what is knowable, it has to itself be eternal or immortal, which means certain things we thought are knowable aren't because they're not of that quality, if that's what knowing is, if that's what learning is about. So therefore, teaching people at schools how to do physical things like amass wealth or manipulate the stock markets or manipulate images and colors in advertising to manipulate people, that's not what we should be doing with our time. If you want knowledge, because those aren't the knowable things. Also, it opens the door to that first question, one of the early questions we had when we were reading this book, which was, why does Socrates begin by saying he doesn't know what virtue is? I would think he would. Apparently I'd be wrong. Is virtue one of the knowable things? So all of those things are truth bombs that, as a topic, is the most significant, and as an answer, is amazing. Should be inspiring. If it hits you, if you have sufficiently followed the dialectic that Socrates just outlined on, excuse me, the immortality of the soul, and it hit you, you saw that it was necessary, beautiful. What was it that changed your mind and allowed you to be convinced by this argument, if you were convinced? Now, the implications would be, if that's what learning is, there is a stage after being convinced that we are immortal and knowing is itself immortal as well. And that's what all learning is about. Beyond that, as an understanding, there is the knowing, the nous, the confirmation of that understanding in direct experience. What would it be like to have that? What would that do to your fear of death? What would it do with your wondering about whether or not you're meaningful? Or what you should be doing in life? If you not only understand that you are immortal and the nature of what is knowable, but you've confirmed that in direct experience for yourself, what will that do to your life? Your doubts, your fears. What would it do to your courage to recognize that and know that and understand that? And hey, if you got there through understanding, the implication that Socrates is demonstrating is maybe you could communicate it as well. So whatever positive effects you had from that understanding and confirmation, maybe you could use that to benefit others, which is an aspect of the dialectic that Socrates is pointing to as the thing that allows for understanding, as the transition into that direct experience or nous or knowing, and as the friendly way that we treat ourselves and our friends artfully so that we can benefit. I'm getting behind in the chat. Sorry, chat. Let me go back. Oh, just to close that loop. Therefore, given the significance of that conclusion and how it would affect your life in those ways we talked about and wondered about, the best topic and the best answer was just dropped on us by Socrates for whoever wants to read it. But he's using that as a stepping stone to make another point. How wild is that we get this amazing wisdom bomb dropped on our asses as a supposedly an aside. It's not the main question. It was not the main point he was trying to make. The main point is, given that learning is remembering, given that our soul is immortal, given that remembering what our soul knew in that immortal realm is knowing, therefore all learning is a process of recalling or remembering what our soul, the immortal aspect of our soul, knows eternally. Given all those things, therefore, the point is, we should always search to know what you don't know. We will be better, more courageous, different relationship to fear as we were talking about. We would be better, more courageous, and in the Greek, more beneficial, if we think that we must search for that which one does not know, rather than thinking that it is not possible to discover that which we don't know, nor must we search. That was the conclusion. So that's interesting. Socrates is willing to, in the other translation he says, go to battle in both word and deed. Also shed some light on that question. If Socrates doesn't know virtue, what does he know? And what is this one of the things that he knows? That we will be better, more courageous, and more beneficial if we always search for that which we don't know and never think we can't find knowledge. Don't give up on the Logos. So interesting that as a tool to make that point, he also drops those wisdom bombs on our asses, which would mean that we are being given an invitation by Socrates to look at this section here. And can we pull out the dialectic? Were there steps he took to make that conclusion? Is making that more profound and maybe more courageous and maybe better and maybe more beneficial point about the immortality of the soul, is that part of using the dialectic? What were the steps he went through? Did he have his eye on that more beneficial point he thought Meno needed to hear first, so that he used it as part of the stepping stone arguments? What were the stepping stone arguments? What was the conclusion? Can you master this as a dialectic? The consequences would be, perhaps you would be better, more courageous, and more beneficial for yourself and others, because having mastered the dialectic in that way, pulling it out, piecing it together, maybe memorizing it, maybe joining the Discord and practicing it on people here, like, hey, fellow Awakening Philosophy Discord member, you got a minute? Can I practice a dialectic on you? It's the one from the Meno that shows the immortality of the soul, but also shows that we should always be seeking to learn things, especially that which is knowable. And then hopefully I'll be on the Discord and I'll say, yep, me, please. I'll take one of those. Thank you very much. And then I'll be the Meno, and hopefully you'll change my mind. Bring me to the seeing of that point through your practice of the dialectic, allowing me to have all those benefits. And hey, maybe even bringing both of us to an experience of what would validate that dialectic. Perhaps that's part of it. But I'll take one, please, is what I would say. But that's the activity. That's the demonstration, or being an active member, an active participant, sharer in the text. This is a new way of reading. I'm not going to do it on the board because I've done a lot already, and I don't want to be a terrible teacher and take away your puzzle, anyone who happens to be watching. But I can point to it and say, yes, do it there. And jump on the Discord and share it with other people. Practice it, master it. That'd be fun. And meaningful. But also fun. We can have coffee. Right, and then we had this next section here. That's where, okay, this is a big introduction. I was going to just jump straight into the reading. So this is where we are right here. After making that declaration, let's check in with the chat before we go any further. I had a moment yesterday where I learned I had to change a lot of habits and self-perceptions. Good for you. I'll lurk and thank you for streaming. Oh, you're welcome. I think it's an active choice of mindfulness and reflection. You keep talking like you know my situation, bro. Well, hopefully that's reassuring to know that it's not unique to you. There might be a principle behind it, and maybe learning that principle is part of why you're going through it as an experience. If there is a point to our experiences, it would have to be in that category of things that are eternal that Socrates has been pointing to. Principles fit that. So it has to be something pertaining to learning or remembering or recalling an aspect of what is eternally true. Therefore, if there is a significance or rationality to our experiences, it would have to be, at least following the logic of these dialectics, to point our attention to the principles behind the specific representation of it in our individual life. What is the pattern? What is the model? So recognizing that your particular situation, friend in chat, is an expression of a model that Meno is going through, that I am going through, that Socrates is or has gone through, might be a principle that the experience is pointing you to recognize. Maybe that's why you went through it. These are the questions that follow these wisdom bombs Socrates just dropped on us. I think when you're higher on a level of professionalism where you're accountable for being wrong, you end up persisting with that and not backing down due to liability or not wanting to feel imposter syndrome. That's a big point. And I think yeah. I think that might be one of the things Socrates or Plato is pointing to in the text. Meno is struggling with being wrong. And Socrates is saying, hey, this is what happens when we're wrong and we're doing real philosophy and we're doing our best to follow the self logos. Or any learning. When you're actually interested in learning and not oppression. But he isn't talking about the other side, the oppression side. Meno's idea of justice includes punishing your enemies, which means there's some sort of justification for violence so long as it's punishing your enemies, which means you have to find some reason for them to be enemies or something where they're wrong. Their beliefs are wrong, their culture is wrong, the God they chose is wrong. So within his own worldview, being wrong is a terrible thing to be avoided at all costs, because the world is just a battleground of violence or people trying to be friends to their be good to their friends and harm their enemies. Violent, competitive existence. That's his worldview. Number one, those sorts of people shouldn't be in charge. Because you can't actually solve problems unless we're being honest about the problems. And punishment never solves problems. So you can't solve problems unless you give up that worldview. That there is some sort of justification for the infliction of violence or oppression as a way of solving a problem or learning something. So if that's your worldview, and if that's the culture you grew up in, there may be good reason why Meno isn't allowing himself to be open and stung and curious and learn. Socrates isn't addressing those good reasons, or potentially not good reasons. They're not good reasons because they don't lead to the good. They do the opposite. But understandable reasons. He hasn't said that. But you are in chat, so maybe that's why. Maybe he's leaving that part out for you to fill in. He's not addressing the negative, he's just giving you the positive. This is the positive if you are open to being mistaken. You can learn, you can play this game with the great Socrates. And all these other things that follow, all these other wonderful things. But if he's saying this is all the mastery of the dialectic, then he's not going to be spoon feeding it to us. He's going to be giving us material that we can do the dialectic with. Therefore, if you're recognizing, Socrates is making a good point about the benefits of being curious and open-minded and being mistaken. Sure. But when you're in the higher level of professionalism and you're accountable to being wrong, you'll end up persisting with whatever you did so you're not wrong and fired and lose your house or can't feed your kids or lose your health care or get sued just for being wrong. So in other words, you are adding the negative implications or division. Socrates is giving the positive. A dialectic has both. So take what you just saw and add it with the text. Find my pen. To practice the dialectic, which is the very thing Meno lacked and needed for all of those reasons, and the very thing that we can do right now. So long as we read in this rational, reflective way. So where's an example of the dialectic on the board? I don't see one. It's a new board, new-ish. Here we go. There we go. One here. So, 4 categories. So whatever it is. So if you wanted to do one on that insight that you just had, if exists, if something exists, what's your subject going to be? If the art of the dialectic exists, what follows? Including what happens when you're wrong. And what happens if you do have the art of the logos, like Socrates? And how does it relate to being wrong? Or if the idea of punishment exists, or if, now see, we want exists. When we say exists, we mean exists as one of those eternal, immortal aspects of pure being that the text has been pointing to. So you can pick it. I encourage you to do it and share it on the Discord. So the 1 or 2 weirdos out there who have come across this channel and dig this kind of stuff can read your dialectic and go, nice. Which is cool. Maybe it sticks with them. Maybe they can carry the same question. But even the nice about a dialectic you've done yourself, that's pretty good. Pretty good. So now the idea of who should be in charge, who rules. Oops, sorry, I'm behind in the chat. Hello, welcome new chatter. I'll get to your message in a second. I'm just a bit behind in the chat. Yes, or those who are self-proclaimed as experts don't want to get a damaged ego, or lose their income tied to their supposed expertise. Is second guessing doubt or personal intuition? It's a good question. I like that question. Does the word second play a role in that question? Where is the line? Double checking and self-doubting? That's a good question. Pertains to this. That voice that says, uh-oh, Socrates just proved you don't know what virtue is. And you shouldn't really be giving talks about it. And you don't really know how to give talks either because you don't know the dialectic, which is how to convey your understanding. Uh-oh. Call him a flat-headed fish. And he did. Tell him that if he ever left Athens, he'd get beaten up. He did. But is there another voice that says, oh, that is curious. Well, that's interesting. I've never seen that before. Or what would happen if I did this? Are there 2 voices? Are there more than 2? Which one would be negative and which would be positive? Which voice should Meno be listening to? And can we ourselves, as people who want to understand and know the mind, can we nail down the 2 voices ourselves, understand where they come from, understand their cause, understand their purpose? If they speak in a funny language that needs to be unpacked, can we learn that language? And then at the end of all of those things, because, these are not just questions, they are also things we want to get answered. We want to know these things and use them artfully to benefit ourselves and then others. And how does all of those things we just mentioned about the voices, their origin, their cause, their purpose, their language, if it needs to be unpacked, we can relate all of these questions to our questions about the dialectic. How do those things relate to the dialectic? It's a good question in chat. So also, no need to answer my questions. I'll post them on the Discord. Sorry, I know you're politely trying to redirect me. No, I'm not trying to redirect you. I just... I enjoy the self-logos so much that when it opens up something, I want to explore it, understand it, nail it down in words, and also see where it takes me before jumping onto the next train of thought. And in my experience, if I do that, sometimes it turns out that something significant in that second exploration can be answered by whatever it was in the conclusion of the former one. In other words, paying attention to the logos, however it is presenting itself. Voices, dreams, conversations with my man Socrates here, the way that we read this podcast, following the logos and looking for the logos, maybe recognizing the logos and following the logos is always worth it. And if it is from, as we've been looking at, an intelligence that's beyond the physical but has a reach into the physical, we can wonder about what that kind of contact would be like, and if it would include markers of intelligibility. In other words, if it would be coincidental or symmetrical, or one theme reflected in complementary ways or opposite ways. Is there a symmetry that would be a mark of a fourth dimensional cube passing through a third dimensional realm? If you want to look at it with physics, as the three-dimensional, fourth dimensional tesseract or cube moves through the three, if you jump on YouTube, you can have a look at that. How would you see a fourth dimensional object affecting our three-dimensional realm? And they show like a three-dimensional object sort of coming into existence and then coming out. Often, so like the two corners you might come to see first if it's a triangle, but there'd be a symmetry between them to let you know that, these two, or no, maybe two or three, depending on the shape of the fourth dimensional object, corners of this cyber triangle, I don't know what you would call it. What's it? Hyper. I think it's called hyper. This hyper fourth dimensional or hyper triangle, and there might be that behind these corners coming into three-dimensional existence because there's a symmetry between them. That was a long road to walk to get to a way of pointing to looking for symmetry. I could have just said, look for symmetry. Or symmetry would be an intelligible way of writing a book. Therefore, do you think the intelligence communicating the self-logos to us at all times would lack that? By the way, that which communicates the self-logos, we talk about it being mind itself, but also beauty itself. Is symmetry a mark of beauty? Do beautiful things create beautiful things? Do hot things make hot things? Do cold things make cold things? Then if beautiful, intelligent things, would they make beautiful, intelligent things? So our pursuit of beauty, including symmetry and justice, include order, looking for ordered symmetry, can bring us to recognize clues that point to the existence of the self-logos, maybe. But that's not me redirecting you. It's me enjoying the self-logos and then getting back to your question. And then playing with the lights. My lights never look good. I don't know why. I need better lights. Tamia, praise JSE Hika. Do you praise JSE Hika? Why would you praise somebody? If JSE Hika has done something really good and praiseworthy, wouldn't you want to understand what it is so that you can yourself master that excellence that you think is praiseworthy? If you met Socrates, would you say praise Socrates, or hey Socrates, how do you do what you do? What makes you so good? What makes you so wise and helpful and good and better than other people? And able to apprehend truth and able to communicate that to others so we all can. How do you do that, mate? You wouldn't say mate because you'd be ancient and Greek. You'd say Almetio. I don't know how Greeks sound. So I'll do Italian. As a Almetio, how do you do it, Socrates? If you didn't, you should be curious about why not. What's limiting you? And does it reflect the kind of blocks or limits that Meno has that's preventing him from asking these questions and praising his own parent or teacher or something? Whoever it was, he got the false belief about what is virtuous from. This idea that virtue or being good or excellent involves having enemies is bizarre and hurting them. Oh, and being kind to your friends. What does that even mean? Where did he get such a crazy idea of how to live and what virtue is? From the people he praises. Because if they're praiseworthy, then they're doing something you can't do. And if you can do it, why believe it from someone else? By the way, if you can do it, you can take the next step and be like Socrates here and share it with others. So thanks for the message. I doubt you're here. Still. I doubt somebody who is saying praise something and then amen and then someone rising and then rest in peace. All in capital letters. I don't think you would have stayed long enough to have hear your question answered. I doubt you would have that much aporia. Right, so now we are back onto the search in common together to find out what virtue is. Then the idea of who should be in charge, because Meno, even though all of those things have been shown that we've talked about, we've really slammed Meno. He still wants to be in charge. And he uses that same argument the stupidest and most harmful people of our time use to justify them being in charge. Freedom, liberty. I should have the freedom to have slaves and be in charge of someone. So you say, in order to be a free man, or a libertarian, we say nowadays, let's read it. If I was the ruler not only of myself, Meno, but also of you, we would not have considered whether virtue is teachable or not teachable until we had first searched into whatsoever self is. Two levels of meaning there, of course. What is virtue itself? But hey, what about the self? This is the twist. This is the levels of meaning. This is having multiple questions over. This is open at the same time. This is the new way of learning or reading. Because, look at that. I have to plug in my fan. Okay, so I'm back from having turned on my fan. It's getting quite hot here. Okay, until we first searched into whatsoever self is. So the two levels of meaning, at least two, maybe you can find more. If I was in charge, I'd want to find out what virtue is before we address the secondary question, can it be taught? And we talked about that question about the use of the dialectic. If Socrates recognizes that this point about the immortality of the soul is needed by Meno, he might use that as a stepping stone argument, so that Meno not only gets an answer to his question, which we saw earlier, but gets the information that is the most significant. In that vein, is the self more significant than virtue? Is that a little clue? Is that a twist? So we take that principle. Your question, is virtue teachable, is less significant, meaningful, important, imperative than figuring out what virtue is, first of all. But isn't virtue the virtue of the self? Isn't that what virtue is? The most virtuous or the most excellent way the self can be? Or the goal of self? The ideal of self? So, using that same logic that opened the text that we read at the beginning, and what is being made now, about halfway through, using that same logic, hey, don't talk about whether or not virtue is teachable. First talk about virtue. But isn't virtue a quality of the self, just like teachability is a quality of virtue? Then before you ask what is the virtue of self, wouldn't you want to know what self is? Is that a hidden question in the text for us? If so, there could be another dialogue that we are having with Socrates at the same time. Let's keep that open. Be pretty cool if it was true. But seeing as you do not attempt to rule yourself, so whatever this mastership or rulership of self is, thyself, this is the honorific self, so this is the self, the big self, the one that we're maybe should even be wondering about before we even think about virtue. Ruling thyself. And Socrates is guessing at his justification. Why should I rule myself? Why should I limit myself in various ways and encourage myself in other ways? Isn't any kind of limitation encroaching on my freedom? Shouldn't I be free to do whatever I want? Who's to say? So this is what I'm thinking you would use to justify not ruling yourself, thyself. But instead you try to rule me and you do rule, and I will yield for you. What else can be done? But you and I are looking at each other and going, giving each other a wink. We know who's really in charge. Because Socrates does the Aikido move and flips him over and says, hey, by the way, if someone were to ask a question of a geometrician, like, can you fit this triangle within the circle? I'd have to create a hypothesis. Let's pull up my highlighter. I have to make a hypothesis and test that hypothesis. And he busts out some Euclid that most people are not familiar with Euclid, so we can get past it because he's just using it as a quick analogy. To do with inscribing a triangle on a given line and whether or not that triangle fits within a circle. I do not yet know whether it is so, but I think there has to be a certain hypothesis to prepare us, as it were, for the task at hand. If on the one hand this triangular space is such as this, that when it is applied to the given line, probably the diameter of the circle maybe, it will fall short by a space, such as the self that is being applied. It appears to me that something else is the result, and in turn, if it is impossible for this to take place, then something else follows. Therefore, based on this hypothesis, I am willing to tell you whether the inscription of the triangular space in the circle is either impossible or not. Alright, okay, so to answer the question whether the triangle can fit inside the circle, he has to create a hypothesis. Either, here's the circle, if I do this, and then this, and it falls short, then something follows. So it goes like that. Or if it goes like this, then another thing follows. That's a hypothesis. Remember, he's teaching us about the dialectic as well. That's what we do in the dialectic, in the division stage. If this were the case, this would follow. If this were the case, this would follow. Also, the dialectic itself has two parts. So within the whole, we have this same principle. So maybe Socrates is also teaching us, and Meno, this dialectic thing he's been going on and on about. In a good way. There's a quote from, I can't remember the text, but it's a quote from Socrates. If it's worth saying many times. The Phaedo, I think. No, somewhere else. But it's there. Okay. Therefore, based on this also, okay, now the other, so also concerning. We're coming back in from our analogy. Considering excellence or virtue, since we do not know what it is, nor what quality it has, let us consider by hypothesizing whether self is teachable or not teachable, by reasoning in the following way. What if virtue exists among the real beings of the soul? See, what if X exists? Remember? This thing here. If X exists, that's the title of your first half of the dialectic, the positive half, if it exists. And the title of another one is if it doesn't exist, and that's the negative. And you have 1, 2, 3, 4 categories, and that's it. Hooray. This is for everybody to practice. If virtue exists among the real beings, that's what we mean when we say if it exists in the dialectic of the soul, So he's tying the previous dialectic we've just looked at. He's bringing the conclusion forward. So virtue exists among the real beings and also the soul. The two are connected in some way. Real beings of the soul. Would it then be teachable or not teachable? First of all, on the one hand, if it is a kind other than knowledge, so if it is a kind other than knowledge, teachable or not, or that which we were just saying, rememberable. So that's the other conclusion from the other dialectic we just did. When we say learning, we mean rememberable. Rememberable. The real beings in the soul, we are trying to remember them. Remember. Whereas on the other hand, it makes no difference to us which name we may use, but whether it is teachable. Is it clear to everyone indeed that human beings are taught nothing else than knowledge? Oh yeah, it makes no difference which name we may use, rememberable or teachable. We just want the answer. And now he's opening it up, it seems, because... Is this clear to everyone? Human beings are taught nothing other than knowledge. Do you think? So, opening question. This goes all the way back to the beginning when Meno said, oh, you gave me a dialectic about shape, and you used color to talk about what shape was. But what if I didn't know what color meant? Socrates said, well, then I would smack you. He didn't say that. He'd say, then I would I'll be firmer with you because I think you're lying. I think you know what color is. And that's, if you were genuine, I would treat you in a more friendly way, the way of the dialectic. But the dialectic requires us to make conclusions together and carry them with us. So if you're saying I don't know what color means, you got to make that point clear. Not just use it as an excuse to reject the conclusion we've come to. We need to conclude. Concluding is important. Concluding is part of understanding. These people that we're talking about that are trying to get away with Meno type stuff, being someone with no understanding, in fact has ignorance, not good ignorance like being stung, aporia, realizing you don't know but I'm curious, and being like Socrates, I still want to become better, more courageous and more beneficial, so I'm going to seek the answer to what I don't know. Not that kind of philosophical ignorance, we call it, but to be convinced in something you're wrong about, like Meno. These sorts of people, and again, as true today as it was then, have to use some sort of logic to justify them being in charge. So it's very hypocritical. There's a lot of hypocrisy behind, American libertarians who say, I want freedom to have slaves. In other words, I should be a master over another human being without myself having any idea of mastery, just because freedom? Can I pretend to be a doctor? Can I pretend to be a businessman or a politician or president? Like you won a contest on a game show? Sad. So this point has to be made by people who want to take charge without skill or an art. So what? So these are the people who have to insist that for there to be no art or no qualification for them to be in charge, no conclusions. You can't have conclusions. You can't come to conclusions, because conclusions you can build on. Come to a conclusion that this is true. Well, hang on a second. Well, then this would follow. And if there are a series of things that are true, then there are people who either understand the truthiness of those things. And if there are a series of things, maybe they fit together. So there's also a way of understanding what is true, but also how do these true parts fit together. Maybe there's an ordered hierarchy. Hey, maybe you can use that understanding of the true parts and how they fit together in an ordered, structured way, following the paradigms perhaps that reflect all of reality. Maybe you could use that understanding and to do things and gain experience of using your understanding of those true things in order to benefit or achieve something. These are all things that necessarily follow there being conclusions allowed to be made, which would mean that the person who should be in charge would be the person who has demonstrated those very things that follow conclusions. There would be a subject of understanding the truth of the parts, how they fit together, how they can be used to benefit. There would be some sort of either skill or art. Therefore, that we should insist and understand and learn and ourselves try to master for all of the things that those ignorant people are claiming to be experts of. In other words, they're going to lose their job. But they are going to be infinitely bettered by losing their job, because they shouldn't have that job. That job is them harming people, which is going to harm their soul beyond even this lifetime and in this lifetime. Physical and emotional damage. So what? So we need to make conclusions. That's a deal breaker. That's a difference maker. That's something in the dialectic itself. And what we're seeing here is those conclusions we take with us, going all the way back to him making that statement about color. Yes, don't lie in order to prevent the conclusion, so you can pretend to be the expert and master of other people despite you not having any understanding, because you're rejecting conclusion. That's not being honest. That's not being a good friend. Because in order to follow the logos or even have a conversation or learn anything and remember things, you have to carry the conclusions agreed upon over to the next stage. And that is coming up here, because he's saying, hey, by the way, to begin with, let's bring the conclusions we've got already. Number one, do we all agree that human beings are taught nothing more than knowledge? Meno says yes. We just concluded that. Oh, and when we say teaching, do we all agree that it's remembering? Yes. Therefore, actually that goes first. If teaching is remembering, then therefore what we would have to be remembering is something eternal and immortal. Therefore, we can give it the capital K for knowledge. Episteme. It's knowledge of that which is eternal, or the principles that will always apply, which do exist in or as aspects of pure being. We're getting there. Then if virtue or excellence is indeed a certain kind of knowledge, there we go, then it is clear that it will be teachable or rememberable. Okay, so now we've established the game rules. The conditions, the win conditions, we could say. And of course, the opposite would follow as well. If it ain't an object of knowledge or a kind of knowledge or an aspect of knowledge, then it ain't teachable or rememberable. Meno said, right on target. Accordingly then, Accordingly then, on the one hand, we are quickly free of this issue, since if it is a kind of knowledge, then it is teachable. If it is not so, then it is not teachable. Very much so, says Meno. Surely then, that which we must consider after this, as it is reasonable, is whether virtue is knowledge or a kind other than knowledge. Meno says, this also appears to me indeed. So this must be considered next. Therefore, let's highlight it. Is virtue knowledge or a kind other than knowledge? What follows then? Do we say that self-virtue is good or something else? Okay, here's a connection. Next to the good. And that the self-hypothesis is maintained by us that self is good. Again, the self of justice, justice itself. So he's this camera angle is terrible. I'll fix it later. Right, so if it's a kind of knowledge, it has to be one of the beings, so therefore we give it the honorific self. So when he says self excellence, we know what he means. The highest, the aspect of being that is excellence itself as the principle, but also the one self. Is the one self good? Do we say therefore that self virtue is good, and the hypothesis that self is good? Does he mean the one self that's beyond even being? I don't know. We'll keep that open. Could be one of those double-layered things. Is it not so then that on the one hand, if something is good, that has also been separated apart from knowledge, perhaps it may be that virtue is not a kind of knowledge, but if there is nothing good which is not contained by knowledge, then we are suspecting that self is a certain kind of knowledge. And if we thought that, we would be suspecting rightly. What does that mean? Okay, so is there something good different from knowledge? Is everything good knowledge? Is the goodness of everything that we consider a good really pointing us towards knowledge of pure being? So because we have just declared that self-virtue is good, definitionally, then either everything good is knowable, or therefore it has to be knowable. But if there is something let's say that again. If there is something good apart from knowledge, it may be that virtue isn't knowledge. It could be that other thing. But if there is nothing good that is not contained by knowledge, then we are right to suspect that self-virtue is definitely a certain kind of knowledge. It is by excellence indeed that we are good. Yes. And if good, then beneficial also. For those that are good are beneficial. This is a conclusion from earlier in the text, remember? Doing benefit, I think, all the way back. I think it was tied to harming your enemies. Okay, so I'm highlighting with the wrong highlighter, just looking at all these lovely rectangles. Alright, so justice does just things and so must always benefit. I think that was what it was. Particular color. Okay, let's... Here we go, here we go, here we go. We are on page 30. It's bright. I think that's better. Turning the light around is better for when I'm sitting back. Okay, let's just keep reading. I'm pretty sure there was some reference to maybe it's later, maybe it's to come. Let's keep reading. And use the highlighter like we have been using before this. I use the squiggly thing to highlight my other document. But this can be just using... There we go. Okay. Those that are good are beneficial. So let's start from the top. Number 1. It is the real beings of the soul that we learn about because learning is remembering. And it's those real beings of the soul that we can call knowledge. Therefore, if we can learn, what we're saying is we're recalling the true beings from an aspect of our soul because it's an object of knowledge. If virtue is learnable, it has to be one of those things, of that nature. Step 2. Excellence is good. Because that's what we say. We say virtue is the best good. Number 3. If there is something good other than knowledge, virtue is not a kind of knowledge. I'm born in 2019. Hooray. Congratulations, Cheddar. If there's nothing good outside of knowledge, then it has to be a knowledge. Self-virtue has to be a kind of knowledge. Next, step 3. We become good ourselves by the virtue. And then by becoming good, we then become beneficial because those who are themselves good can benefit. Yes. Therefore, conclusion, virtue is beneficial, helpful, profitable, useful. Profitable, it shouldn't be there because profit's not great. We know what it's meant, what it means. What profit means in this context. It's not extracting value and exploiting. It's not internalizing profits and socializing costs. Just benefiting. To be good is to do good, which is to benefit. Then so these are the steps that you could be memorizing and inviting somebody on the Discord to practice with you. Should be a link to the Discord below the video. I hope you don't believe in creationism, intelligent design over evolution. But if you do, then it's your own opinion. Right, and if it's an opinion, why would anybody care? Because whose opinions do you care about? Nobody's, just your own. And why should you? Opinions have nothing to do with truth. You can have an opinion that's not true. In fact, it's by thinking in terms of opinions and beliefs that allow us to be manipulated. Because somebody could give us the opinion or the belief that this bad thing is good. So we would desire this bad thing. And if we get this bad thing and it's ours, wouldn't we be made bad? So we would be harmed. So people who think in terms of beliefs and opinions can be manipulated to seek the thing that causes them harm. However, understanding, if you're not believing somebody, but you're understanding it for yourself, you're understanding what the pieces are, whether or not they exist, how they fit together, why they have to fit together in this way, then you have an understanding of whether or not that thing is true and good. You can't be tricked. So your question about whether or not there is an intelligent force behind the evolution of humanity, unless you want to be manipulated and tricked into seeking the thing that harms you, you shouldn't be looking for beliefs or opinions. You should be looking to understand what's true. Actually answer the question. How do you answer questions like that? Well, first of all, you got to be curious. Before even being curious, you got to realize you don't know the answer right now. You don't know whether or not there's intelligent design or there is evolution or how they relate together. You don't know. No, that next step no one does isn't fair. It's not fair to say that. You don't know everyone in the world. You don't know what they know. No one you met does. Or maybe they did and you just didn't bother to ask them. But what you can say is you don't know. Whether or not anyone else knows, you don't know that yet. You don't know everyone. And you can't make a general statement about whether or not it's knowable. So you say, I don't have to know everyone. I know it's unknowable. I know the nature of this question is unanswerable. So therefore, I don't have to know everyone to realize nobody knows. But didn't you just say you don't know yourself? So how can you at the same time say you don't know, but also you do know its nature as being unknowable? Doesn't make sense. But you do know that you don't know. The next step is being stung. Can you get curious about not knowing? Can you be okay with not knowing? Can you talk about something? Can you pose questions? Turn it into a question. That's the next step. After you're sufficiently stung, curious, after realizing you have philosophical ignorance or you don't know something, you've gotten stung, you've gotten curious. Now you've crafted a question. Now work on the question. Polish it up nicely. And what do we do with a question? It's going to help you remain curious. It can help direct your focus so you don't get distracted with football or something, because it's a question worth answering. It's a personally significant question. That is about the self. Or about reality, at least. So it'll help you keep focused. By the way, a single-minded focus on a personally significant question that keeps you open and curious, that's meditation. If you can sustain that question and that state of being, formally, that's meditation. Okay, great, you're meditating, so what? Well, can you do it even betterer, with more virtue? If virtue is seeking excellence or the highest good, what's the best way of having and carrying a question? Right, I don't know what you are referring to when you said that you did meditation, but formally, let's go through this real quick. What the word meditation means. If you have a object, let's zoom in a bit more. An object that you are focusing on. Focus. And the object, we'll make the object something. We'll make it a star. That's a terrible way of doing a star. That's just about... Let's do that one. Okay. Alright, this is your object. Now, sustained focus. So if we take this focus and it's sustained, if you can keep focused on that object for a period of time, that gives us something called concentration. If this is sustained, if you can sustain your concentration, hey, you can stay focused on that object for a period of time. Somebody is saying, hey, come watch this new episode of this. Come watch the football game. Come to the party. And you say, hang on a second, I'm focused on this object of concentration. That's sustained through time. Sustained concentration gives us meditation. And if you sustain that, it gives rise to a state of being we call contemplation. Let's zoom back a little bit. Contemplation. Contemplation is characterized at its nature. Contemplation is union with the object of your focused, sustained concentration. That I'm really good at drawing. Perfect. Union with what we are going through in this text is how to facilitate this best. Because the things that you can actually unify with in contemplation are what we're just talking about. We call them objects of knowledge. Objects of knowledge. The things that you can know, because knowledge means unification with it. It's not a belief. It's not even an understanding. It's a unification. What? with my mouse clicking when it shouldn't be. Knowledge. Kind of knowledge. Now we have to use the word nous because we don't have a good understanding of knowledge in English culture or language yet. So this is what nous is. And we've just gone through, and you can check out the video from yesterday on YouTube. There's a link below. The objects of knowledge are knowable because they are eternal. Objects of knowledge necessarily are eternal, which means outside of the physical world or the realm of being. Okay. Education, we've just concluded, or learning, is this. Is this knowledge? Gaining knowledge, which can only exist because, so we can learn, therefore we can learn, which is really remembering. We remember the nature of being, the nature of what is knowable, remember. Therefore, learning is remembering. And you can only do that because you can only go through a process of this in order to remember if the soul, these three dots mean therefore. The soul is also eternal, but when we talk about being eternal, we say we are immortal. Immortal. So this is where we are in the text. I did some, the thought isn't mine, just appears without will. Right, sounds like you did some good meditation by reflecting on the cause of the thoughts that come up. It's a nice one. The object is kind of in front of my face. So that sounds like a fun consciousness. Yeah, yep. But also it's consciousness awareness, right? So your object is on consciousness. Now, why is that important? Well, this is learning. Oh, and by the way, if it's also meditation and contemplation as well as learning, then there is no difference between real learning and spirituality. In other words, every university should have meditation halls, and every ashram should have classrooms where we learn this. We learn philosophy, we learn the dialectic and the art of the logos. So what? Well, so if this is what learning is, we better make sure that what we have right at the beginning of this whole journey from concentration to meditation to contemplation begins with, where do we put our attention? Where are you going to rest your attention? You got some choices. Earlier today we talked about the kaka daemon and the good daemon. The bad and the good. Kaka is Greek for bad. The voices, the inner voice or thoughts that we have that might sabotage our progression towards our goals. Sometimes an encouraging voice. We talked about dreams. Are you going to focus on them? Are you going to focus on the football? Hey, are you going to focus all your life energy on, it's not even energy yet, it's just attention, which becomes energy, which becomes what you contemplate or concentrate on to think about. On money? Be a banker? Become a Elon Musk or a Jeff Bezos? How about fame? Want to become a President Trump? Or power? What are you going to be focusing on? Now, because of what we've just walked through, and again, if you want to, go ahead and master the steps in this dialectics, because this would be one hell of a thing to be able to reason through for your own benefit, but also for us that you can talk with and practice your dialectic with. It all starts, and because of this reflection, we realize, hang on a second, we better make sure that what we are focused on is something that is knowable, which is the question of the text. Is virtue knowable? Because it has to be knowable if it's teachable, because teaching is really remembering what our soul knows through the part of the aspect of our soul that is itself eternal or immortal. In other words, what are you focusing on? And it sounds like your meditation was on consciousness, which is great, because that's another word for mind. Literally, you're not going to miss the mark if you're on mind, because that which is knowable in nous, we call it being, we call it eternal, we also call it mind. So we can describe this experience as of knowing as ousia, which is the mind turning around to know itself. That's ousia. So what? So we better make gosh darn sure that the object of our focus is something knowable. That's philosophy. You've just defined philosophy. Notice the special words in philosophy, like nous, and along with which is knowledge, but a knowledge of something specifically, and dianoia, which is understanding, but not our understanding something specifically, the specific thing we are knowing and understanding, that makes it dianoia and nous, is it's on being, it's on mind, it's on the aspects of being and mind, or mind. The knowable things, that's philosophy. You might start by having your focus on pretty shapes and colors, beauty. Gosh darn, if you're walking down the street and you see someone or something beautiful, you can't help but focus your attention on that object. That's what beauty does. And what we do in philosophy is ousia. We reflect on our experiences, and hopefully you reflect on, after seeing 1, 2, 3 beautiful people or beautiful objects, you start wondering, hang on a second, if there is this beautiful thing, this beautiful thing, this beautiful thing, all I'm seeing is beauty as an adjective. Where is beauty itself? That it can touch this person and touch this mountain range and touch this painting. What is beauty? And if I've only ever seen it as an adjective, how did I learn it? How do I recognize beauty? And at such an artful level that I can recognize beautiful paintings as well as beautiful women. How does that work? That, having the experience of naturally focusing on a beautiful object, along with ousia, reflecting on that experience with words, that's philosophy. Or that wakes you up to philosophy. Formerly, that's not philosophia, philosophy, that's philomathesis, love of learning. But that question is enough to get you, hang on a second, what's beauty itself? Now you're focused on the objects, self-beauty or beauty in being before its representation in the physical world. Now you're focused on an object that is knowable. Good for you. My flamingo and my chicken dance for you. They dance for you. That's how happy my animals are for you. Look at them dance. Look at them dance. Music, please. This is them dancing for you. Why? Because your focus is on an object that can go through this process of sustained concentration into meditation. Sustained meditation, contemplation, where you unify with that object because it is something unifiable or knowable. So what? Well, now Socrates is asking the question, okay, given all this, is all good contained within this knowledge? Or nous? In other words, is it only this thing that's really good? This thing that all physical learning directs us to? All philosophy is about? All of the aspects of virtue, we've already talked about justice and beauty being aspects, or courage being aspects of virtue, and therefore an unknowable. Why are we asking this question? Because virtue, or excellence, our self-excellence, means, or is defined by, let's say definition, defined by good. By good. To be virtuous is to be good. And to also being good, virtue also does good. Does good, or functions, let's say functions or demonstrates. Notice we've got defined, definition. Now we've got demonstration. So even we can see the dialectical structure and pattern in the thinking of our man Socrates. A dialectician must therefore what? See through the dialectic. Use the dialectic. Demonstrates or functions. Demonstrates or functions in good ways, which is called benefit. 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 Let's put. So, because virtue or excellence is defined by being good, and if you are being good, you are functioning in a good way, that's benefit. So, definition, demonstration. So what are we seeing? We are seeing Socrates himself demonstrating or functioning through the dialectic. What does that mean? Well, just following this logic, we can walk it back. If he is demonstrating the dialectic in his thinking, which also does benefit us and Meno, would we say he's defined by as the art of as a dialectician? Probably, yeah. He'd be a dialectician. He's defined by it. He's being it. It's his way of being, which defines philosopher, by the way. Dialectic is the exercise of philosophy, is what we read in the Phaedo. So is that interesting? We're learning about the thinking behind the man that we ourselves want to be defined as dialectician, so that we can benefit ourselves and others. Be it. So there's our question. Is there a goodness outside of that which is knowable? Because it would, if there isn't, then we can say, hey, this our soul's goal, our soul's urge to be focused on beautiful objects, and then to want to talk and write poems and tell your friends and fantasize even about that beautiful object you've seen. To have sustained concentration on that object with that reflection in words can lead you to wonder about beauty itself. Hopefully such that you can concentrate on it with a question, helps you concentrate. So here we have, how do we have sustained concentration? We can contemplation is union with the object, but what about meditation? What about right here? How do you keep a sustained focus in a receptive kind of way to the insights that come from this, to the learning or the remembering, to the remembering? How do you have sustained concentration on an object of your interest such that you can be open to that experience of remembering or learning or news? So far we've got how about stung or aporia or open, the not knowingness and openness and wonder, curiosity and wonder. This state of mind being stung or aporia. Stung. Which Socrates says, yeah, if you're stung, I've only stung you because I am even more stung myself. So Socrates is in this state of being. Also, what was the conclusion Socrates is going to go into battle for word and deed for? If you do realize you don't know, you have to also search for it. Search for what you currently, at the moment, don't remember, don't know, or don't remember, because that's what knowing is. Don't remember. So if that's the process, we got to make sure our object is on something. Our focus is on an object that is knowable. Or if it isn't, if it's on a physical object, like examples of beauty, you better do some ousia, reflect on it, put words on it, wonder about it, become stung by it. A lot of people will see a beautiful person and get angry because they have false beliefs about beauty, or about beauty in women, or about beauty in men, or about beauty itself. You want to be doing your best to overcome those negative reactions to beauty, or things that naturally draw your focus, naturally good or beautiful things. That's philosophy. That's philosophical midwifery. That's every second day on this channel. We use the dialectic to uncover those blocks and free ourselves from those blocks. But free of those blocks, you'd probably be interested in that thing you were interested in, that beautiful thing, reflect on it with the logos to wake up to the fact that, hang on a second, there must be a principle behind it or a cause. So ousia, reflecting on causes and principles. Get stung about that. Concentrate on that. What is being itself, or beauty itself, or justice itself, or in this text, what is excellence or virtue itself? Be stung by not knowing. Search. This is what Socrates will go to battle in word or deed for, because that's going to make you, oh, by the way, if you do, he says it's going to make you better, more courageous, or brave. Let's say, I like brave. Braver and more beneficial. Oh, 3 B's. Beneficial. Be stung. Search for what you don't know. Socrates points out this is going to make you better, braver, and more beneficial. Sustained meditation, which is sustained concentration, can lead to contemplation where you actually unify with that. That's an experience we call nous, or the enlightenment experience. So we could say this is also enlightenment. So there's no distinction between spirituality and understanding, or East and West, or intellectualism. Philosophy doesn't make those unnecessary and untrue divisions. So we can say it's an object of knowledge, but it's also the enlightenment experience, because it's your soul recognizing the eternal nature of your own soul, which is enlightening. It's like, wow, I can't believe that. I don't have to believe it. I saw it, or I was it. But that's illuminating, and it's intelligence itself. So if that's where the intelligence is, and that's where the logos is from, our ability to share in and maintain that experience or state of being, along with the understanding it took to get there, makes us more intelligent, makes us more sharing in the logos, which therefore makes us more beneficial, which would mean we're participating more in the good. Enlightenment. Experience. So I'm saying experience because the experience alone isn't enough. You need the logos, you need the understanding. So this process of going from concentration through meditation to contemplation on an object of focus, hopefully that exists in being, or if it's not yet, make sure you reflect on it and wonder about that beautiful person. Find 2 beautiful people. That's enough to wonder about where beauty is. If 2 people have it, or 2 kinds. If you find a special person who has physical beauty and also has the beauty of a rare kind of intelligence and insight and natural propensity to want to understand and bestow benefit through reflecting on real causes in an honest and sometimes funny and charming way, then you can wonder about those 2 kinds of beauty within the same person. To give yourself the question of being. What is beauty itself in being? Because that's what's knowable. That's what learning's about. It's something within the soul, because the soul also is immortal, for us to be able to learn in that way. And our question in the text is, by the way, if virtue is defined by being good, which also benefits, is everything good within the same experience? If it is, then we know that virtue is one of those knowable things. If there's something good other than or even beyond this experience, could that be virtue? Because virtue means to be most good and beneficial. Now, if this is our model for learning and spirituality and enlightenment, Our question is, well, okay, how do we do it better? It always has to be, how do we do it better? That's part of excellence. How do we facilitate this process better? Well, we've already seen some parts. We've seen the significance of being stung. We worked with that. Drama and dialectic with Meno. We talked about searching for what we currently don't know makes us better, braver, and more beneficial. But what else? What else? How else can we do this? By the way, if we are stung and seeking, how do we seek for that which we don't know? How do we maintain our focus? How do we maintain our focus on our object? How do we maintain being stung or open, even if we don't know? How do we maintain a search? How can we bring all these things together? If this is the archetype of learning and spirituality, and what benefits? How about a question? To carry a question is to be on a quest. You need a question, because your question is of that object. You're still on that object. Oh, but you're open and receptive because it's a question. It's not a certainty. It's not a belief that you grew up with, that you're insisting on or stuck on or limited by. No, you're open and curious. But you're also searching if it's a genuine question. It's not a trick question you get like from a guru, like a koan. What is the sound of one hand clapping? That is a question. But it's not yours. It's not the question that you're naturally motivated to understand. Yourself, your own excellence, your own highest goals, why you have the problems that you have in midwifery. These are all things about yourself that you will have questions about. So you're genuinely seeking for what you don't know if it's a genuine question. Okay, so if this is the model for learning, remembering, and enlightenment, the spiritual experience that Meno missed, what's the best way of crafting and walking with and using and functioning through, being defined by, being ourselves and functioning through so that we benefit? What's the best way of doing those with questions? Benefit means an art. An art has to benefit the subject, like the art of medicine has to benefit the patient. So our question would therefore be, what is the skill or art of asking questions, crafting questions, holding questions, sharing with your friends questions so that you benefit in this way? That is what has been called the art of the dialectician. Hooray. Wow. So, could each stage that we have gone through together, that has brought all of the texts that we've read so far together, brought us up to our question, which is here, and also helps us understand learning and spirituality, and also gives us an insight into the thinking behind Socrates. If he is the dialectician, we want to be the dialectician too. Why? Because each stage of this requires the dialectic. How do you move from beautiful shapes and colors to contemplating something that is knowable? Wonder. You have to have a question. Why was that girl beautiful and that painting beautiful? Or that other girl beautiful? What is beauty itself? You need a question. You need to not just have a question, carry it. Wonder about it. Ask your friends. The dialectic. Hey, maybe even the dialectic, you can, if you're talking with a friend, maybe they can even direct you with questions. Maybe you've never thought about the noun. Maybe you've never heard of beauty itself or the self-logos. Is that a beneficial question to ask? Therefore, that would be part of the art of the dialectic. Sustained concentration to meditation. Hey, you're having these conversations through the dialectic yourself, but also you're doing your best to facilitate it in others. So whether you're being a Meno and being benefited by a dialectician, or you are trying your best to share in the art, function through the art, benefit the soul of another human being, it's the dialectic as well. The goal of the dialectic is the art of the logos that leads to nous, contemplation. By the way, your union with the object of knowledge, you'd probably want to understand. Do you bring your dialectical understanding into the experience? Does it make a difference? Will it affect someone? Are there various levels of nous? And are those levels reached based on your level of mastery of the dialectic? After the experience, don't you want to reflect on it in a certain kind of a way? Just as we reflected on these physical experiences at the beginning, we also want to reflect on the most meaningful experiences, the most eternal, beautiful, true experiences. There's some more usia or some more dialectic. So learning, which is remembering the real beings that are knowable because they are within the soul, the immortal aspect of the soul, is the dialectic. The dialectic is how to do every stage of this process that we've just outlined well. Skillfully, artfully. Which is neat because he has dropped this dialectic thing several times. Hey, this is how you understand things, Meno. You can't understand things. This is how you define things. This is how you help people. This is how you master. I know you want to be ruling the conversation because my freedoms, I want to be in charge because my freedoms. No. The person in charge needs to be the person with the art. The art is the dialectic. This is why you can't understand. This is why you can't define. This is why you haven't experienced nous or been initiated into the spiritual experience of being. Same thing. It's a result of the dialectic. So our question is, number one, is everything good knowable? Because if virtue is being the most good by definition, then it would have to be within knowing. Or is there something outside of the knowable experience of being, maybe even more good than even the experience of goodness, perhaps? Because the good can refer to being, which is the knowable experience, contemplative experience, but the good self is, here we go, the physical world of becoming, the world of being, these here, the eidos, the aspects of being like courage and justice, the aspects, the principles and causes of virtue, the selves, that's in the realm of being. But this one self that's beyond the know thyself that Meno should have knowledge of and an art with, so that he would be a true master or ruler of himself. And Meno's not doing that, but this is the thyself, the one self. This is also called the good self in the Republic. So is this virtue? Is this virtue? Or is there something else over here that's also good but not knowable? That's where we are in the text. So that's where we are within the story. But our question is, well, which is virtue? If the dialectic is the activity or the skill or the art of doing most best everything that we do as a human being, whether it's starting by looking at shapes and colors and wondering about that, that's best done through the dialectic. Having the questions about the cause or principles of the physical world that we perceive through the physical senses and our opinions and beliefs, that reflection on the causes is formally the dialectic. That's dianoia, understanding. The dialectic. Reflection on that experience, the dialectic. Asking questions that you gain, that you are taking this as a way of being, ousia, reflecting on experiences and looking for principles and causes, taking that way of being that led you to this experience of knowledge and applying it even here. Is there a cause even of this experience? That's the dialectic. Therefore, the logos, the art of the logos or the dialectic, can maybe even take us up to here. Does that make virtue the dialectic? Or is virtue the state of being where you are open and receptive? You are stung and searching. Is this virtue? Seeking to be betterer, seeking to be more brave, seeking to be able to do more benefit. Is this virtue that leads to the dialectic? Or does the dialectic lead to this? The dialectic, a kind of activity that we can do to awaken a kind of way of being of this. Socrates says he's always stung. Is that a way of being? Is always being stung and in wonder and wondering about the logos and exploring the logos and being awesome at encouraging Meno and his other friends to do this, which requires courage? Is that virtue? Does the dialectic lead to the state of being, of naturally being stung? Is that virtue? I don't know, but there are a lot of good questions, and it feels like I can smell virtue around the corner. We are getting closer and closer to virtue, but nonetheless, we are having more and more questions about virtue. So hey, that's great, because having questions and doing the dialectic as we read on virtue is the process of learning or remembering and the process of the spiritual journey together. So we're doing the thing. Hooray for us. Dance for us, animals. Dance monkeys. We're doing the thing. We're doing the thing we're supposed to be doing. Good fuss. Hooray. All right. So a silly voice and some dancing with my little animal stuffies. So, if we have been holding a sustained focus on this object called virtue or self-virtue, while ourselves allowing ourselves to be wrong and being stung, while sharing in chat and wondering about the differences between images and appearances, images, opinions, and beliefs of the physical world, and what we're doing in philosophy, looking at the realm of being, so that we are searching for what we are okay to be wrong about while being focused on that. If it turns out that virtue is, to answer this question, one of the knowledges, one of the things that is knowable, one of the aspects of knowledge, one of the knowable beings within the eternal part of soul, then that means this whole time as we are crafting these questions and building these questions and sharing these questions and reflecting on these questions, we are doing this, a sustained concentration on something which is knowable. Which means we might awaken for ourselves new insight into knowledge or the enlightenment experience. Hooray for us.
Wow.
If it turns out that this Socrates and Meno and us come to the conclusion that it isn't knowable, then we've been wasting our time. Because we can't unify with it as an object of knowledge. If it turns out it's beyond even this, We might have this experience. We might be shooting for the stars because the kind of good is beyond even nous, beyond even being, the self-good. In which case, in seeking this, it's funny because our object is a star. There's a saying, shoot for the stars and be happy with the moon. In other words, if you're shooting for something higher, you might not get all the way there, but you might fall a little bit short, but have something amazing. You might have this experience of the idea or the experience, eidos, Greek word idea, not a concept, not a thought. You might have this nous experience because the virtue that we're seeking is even beyond it, and you aimed for those stars, but you fell short, or this is a stepping stone to reach there. In which case, we'll have this experience of nous that we have reached through understanding, so we're able to understand it, integrate it into our way of self-being, which might be self-virtue. We can definitely use it to benefit, but also benefit ourselves because, hey, use that to wonder about the cause of even that and have this experience of nous along with whatever it is to experience the self, which is beyond experience. The other kind of enlightenment enlightenment level or state, which might be the third level of questioning. Socrates talking about Meno to get him off physical objects to start focusing on something knowable, virtue, not his opinions of virtue from the physical world, not his beliefs from teachers and religious figures he praises. No. To get to this being, that might be where Socrates is at. And there may be another question of going beyond Socrates to what's beyond that. I don't know. These are all hypotheses we are carrying. But what we are doing is making lots of questions, getting lots of stung, doing lots of searches, doing lots of reflection or ousia on what the heck virtue is and how it relates to the dialectic and the state of being in wonder. Stung. And how it relates to how we're reading, this new way of reading we're discovering. So we are doing this question on the object, hoping that it's knowable or beyond knowing, so that at the end of all of this, so long as we're doing the dialectic, so long as we're sharing as best we can with courage, trying to be better, trying to benefit ourselves, maybe we will end up with both. And maybe once you do that, you'll share your experiences with the rest of your friends in Discord or in the comment section on YouTube. And because this quest that you're on isn't a solo quest.
I'm looking for someone to share in an adventure.
This is a human quest. This is all of our quests. Whether you start seeking beautiful objects or even focused on money or fame or whatever you started to be focused on, that's where we all start. This journey of developing a question about the causes of these things that we begin focused on, or the dialectic, this mastery and progression through the dialectic as a kind of walking dialectic to master the art of the dialectician is for everyone. It's our journey. It's the journey to participate or share in intelligence itself and truth itself and self itself beyond even that. We're all in this game. It's not a solo quest. So, in the ups and downs, insights and puzzles, I am encouraging anyone watching to join the Discord and share it with the rest of us who are also on the same quest. And hey, if you want to send a message to someone and say, I've practiced a dialectic or I've memorized a dialectic, would you like to thumbs up? Let me practice on you or see if I can walk you through it. Then please do that too. Lots of questions, lots to wonder about, lots to get questions about, lots to practice the dialectic on. Until next time. Thank you so much for joining. Thanks for the new people in chat. Thanks for the questions. Thanks for the sharing of your experiences, your wondering and your meditation experiences. Really helpful, really useful. Hey, and it came back around to be exactly what we were talking about. In answering your question, we also served another function of unifying all of the conclusions, which is the very thing that we have to do as a dialectician that isn't encouraged or isn't taught in a world of charlatans. Coming to conclusions, carrying your conclusions. Not only that, but seeing how the conclusions that you've come to, that you're carrying with you, build to even greater questions and maybe are even reflected in the other questions and conclusions that other people are sharing with us, other genuine philosophers on the genuine quest to know the self, to benefit, to be good, to have virtue. You might notice a symmetry unfolding in that asking, following the logos of one person's question helped us see something that unified the text in our reading for us and also gave birth to more of our own questions. A remarkable symmetry. Just as if you go on YouTube and you see videos of how a fourth dimensional cube would be seen in our three-dimensional world, you see it as little corners, but there's a symmetry between. We talked about that earlier. Check it out on YouTube if you're curious. But the point is, we are recognizing a symmetry and beauty in the logos as it unfolds in our questions and contemplation, meditation, concentration, which is beautiful, which is fun, and which is something to wonder about. Thank you so much for joining me, and I will see you tomorrow, where we will be going on to doing the exact same thing, not on what's true, but uncovering or remembering a false conclusion we made when we were young that has been functioning to block our progress along this path. Got to be doing both, and it's fun, and it's the dialectic. And it's tomorrow. I'll see you then.